Hi, I'm Patty Ann Brown, and you are in the Strategy Room. A big day at Trump Tower in New York. President-elect Donald Trump Thursday had a series of high-profile meetings on his agenda. This as he considers who will assume the top roles in his future administration. The list of visitors includes several potential cabinet picks, including Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina, who originally backed presidential candidate Marco Rubio. Texas Congressman Jeb Hensarling also sitting down with Trump. Trump also meeting Thursday with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. So joining us now, Democratic strategist Christopher Hale and Republican strategist Frank McCarthy. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
So Governor Nikki Haley is set to meet with Trump. She was critical of him during the campaign. She backed Rubio and then Senator Ted Cruz, and she's now reportedly being considered for a cabinet post. Frank, we've seen a lot of former Trump critics changing their tune. What do you make of that and of Nikki Haley in particular?
Well, I think it's a smart move by Donald Trump to give it some consideration. You know, the idea of putting together, as Abraham Lincoln did, this cabinet of rivals, former rivals of yours, bringing them into the fold, bringing them into the mix. I think it's a smart move, and Haley is definitely somebody who is qualified to do it. And as for people who are changing their tune, so to speak, you know, once they got to the general election, I think it was pretty clear that folks wanted to change and make sure that it was a Republican-oriented change, which is why a lot of these folks ended up getting behind Donald Trump in the general election.
So Trump was also meeting with Jeb Hensarling, who was the chair of the House Financial Services Committee. Earlier on Fox, Wall Street Journal columnist Dan Henninger praised Hensarling big time, saying that if he is named Treasury Secretary, it would immediately make dramatic improvements to the economy. Christopher, what do you make of Hensarling?
You know, I think Jeb Hensarling is a way better pick than Jamie Dimon. That was someone else who was rumored to be a possible Treasury pick for President-elect Trump. Of course, Jamie Dimon, a big Wall Street guy. I think if the President-elect is serious about draining the swamp, we need to hear more about Hensarling. We need to hear more about Nikki Haley and less about Rudy Giuliani and Newt Gingrich. I think these are two insiders who have been, quite frankly, part of the swamp. Newt Gingrich has been in town since 1978. So I hope the President-elect goes more in the former rather than the latter if he's serious about draining the swamp and changing things in Washington. All
right. Well, the meeting with Japan's Prime Minister is big. It's going to be Trump's first sit-down with a world leader since becoming president-elect. On the campaign trail, Trump expressed displeasure with the U.S. obligation to defend Japan. He said he'd consider withdrawing some of the 50,000 American troops in Japan. He also wants Japan to pay more for its own defense. The Pentagon set to spend $5.5 billion on protecting Japan this year alone. Trump also, of course, opposes the Trans-Pacific Partnership, says it gives Japan and other countries unfair trade advantages. Frank, what do you see coming out of this meeting?
I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That was a big part of Donald Trump's platform, and one I've talked about on Fox News many times before. Donald Trump wants to bring back the Reagan era, where we actually negotiated from a position of strength and put American values on the table. And I think that that's what he's going to say to the Prime Minister today, is that he's not anti-trade. He was against this giant huge trade agreement that made made Obamacare look like a coffee table book. It was so big. You know, we want to increase trade and increase access without having to kowtow to countries like Malaysia and Brunei and Vietnam in order to do it. And I think he's also going to be talking about some real opportunities we have here with the new regulatory environment that will benefit everybody, including the Japanese. You know, FERC has been sitting on an LNG plant that would put 10,000 Americans to work, and Japan wants to buy that liquefied natural gas. But environmental extremists in the Obama administration have prevented that from going forward. So on day one, you're going to see things getting better for America and our relationship with countries like Japan.
Interesting. Christopher, what do you think? Can Trump and Shinzo Abe come together on some of these issues?
You know, it's interesting. One of Donald Trump's first foray into global politics was in the 1980s. He put out an advertisement in the New York Times in the late 1980s criticizing the Reagan policy, foreign policy with Japan, and said we shouldn't pay for Japan's security. So I think this is something he's been talking about a long time. I think on the, particularly on the question of trade, you know, President-elect Trump said he was going to be a president for all Americans. the TPP benefits the few and far between, and mostly the rich. But I also think, too, there's something that I really want them to consider going forward. The TPP is not just bad for lower-income Americans. It's really bad for the global poor, for the environment, for those excluded and left behind. So I hope, just as President-elect Trump says he's going to be a president for all Americans, that he's truly a president that understands global issues and fights for those who are most excluded and most left behind. And reforming the TPP is the first step in doing that.
All right, we will see what comes out of all of these meetings. Christopher, Frank, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
And for complete political coverage, stay right here on FoxNews.com. I'm Patty Ann Brown. Thanks for watching.